Good evening, everyone, and morning to some. Welcome back to another wonderful tasting with the Virtual Tasting Society. I am Vadim Perlovsky, and today I'm excited to welcome not one, not two, but Sam Filmus has a brand, so that's 3 brands. So we have some really amazing folks joining us today. We're going to be learning about Pokeno, single malt distillery out of New Zealand, and Isle of Raasay, the distillery that everyone was talking about when I was on Sky, making huge waves, new single malt out of Scotland on a tiny island, but I'll let them talk about it when we get there. Bringing all of us together is our lovely friend, Sam Filmus, who owns and founded Impex Beverages. He has been a true friend of the brand and has helped us put together tastings with lots of different brands in his portfolio. So we're happy to have him here today, as well as the founders of Isle of Raasay and Pokeno. Thank you so much for being here, Sam. Do you want to introduce yourself and tell us about what we're doing today?
Thanks, Vadim. Well, thank you again for inviting, and especially with including those wonderful brands like Pokeno and Isle of Raasay to enjoy for this wonderful group of yours. Nice to see you all again. William, nice to see you as always. Thanks for joining us. Excited to see what you think, because your discerning palates really tells the truth. So if you feel you don't like anything of it, you got the guy right there, and then William Dobby. If you like it, thank me for that. Anyways, I think we should just start.
I know we have some newbies here today, so anyone who's here for the first time, welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. I know Anna rallied some friends, so we're going to have a good showing today. So just a little housekeeping. We're here to get nerdy. We're here to ask questions, so don't hold back. Use the chat. Feel free to unmute yourself and participate. This is not a one-way Instagram live or what have you. We're here to participate and ask questions and learn about the whiskey and get nerdy. So enjoy. Like I said, feel free to unmute yourself. Just keep yourself on mute when you're not talking, so we don't get background noise and we don't talk over each other. Other than that, that's what we're here for. So, and Sam did post the order in the chat for anyone who's joining us late or anyone joining us on the YouTube at home later. We're going to start with Pokeno Original, then Discovery, then the Pokeno Double Bourbon, and then move over to to Scotland, to the Isle of Raasay single malt, peated ex Bordeaux, and then peated ex rye cask. So that's going to be our order for tonight. So all that said, should we kick it off with Pokeno?
Well, I don't see Matt Jones joined us, so maybe I just texted him. So maybe we'll start with Raasay and then go back to Pokeno.
Okay, no worries.
Okay.
Okay.
William, all yours.
Okay, guys. Good morning or good evening for all of you. My name is William Dobby, and I'm the commercial director for the Isle of Raasay Distillery and its parent company, R&B Distillers. And just a little correction there for you guys. I actually must confess I'm not the founder. My father is, though, however, and we share the same name. So there's often a lot of mix up with who's who. But, I've been involved to some extent really from the start with the business and creating the Isle of Raasay single malt. And so I joined the business full time in 2019. And I've been leading the sales and marketing efforts since then. And we were founded the company was founded in 2015, but we started production in September 2017. So, been here since before we released single malt. So hopefully, I can use this evening for you guys, this morning for me. I'm in France at the moment to explain, a little bit more about what we're doing at the Isle of Raasay Distillery and answer your questions about the spirit, our island, or indeed the distillery itself. So good to meet you all. And why don't we dive in by pouring the first dram. I will probably not join you with the drinking part of it, just because of the time at the moment, but I will. I've got a bottle here, and I've got the cask samples also. So I will pour, I'll nose with you, etc., and explain the flavors that you should be hopefully picking up from our single malt and our single cask bottlings. I guess just while you pour that first dram, before we dive into the liquid itself, I'll give a little bit of background about the company, some of our short history in the sort of context of whiskey, and also some of our plans for the future. So yeah, so we are a single malt and gin distillery based on a small island on the northwest coast of Scotland. And Vadim here, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, said that he was on Skye recently. So you'll actually see behind me some mountains here. That's the Isle of Skye. So the Isle of Raasay is situated just between the Isle of Skye and the mainland of Scotland. So it's in the there's a channel of water between the Isle of Skye and the mainland of Scotland. It's a small island, home to only 161 people. I'm not sure if all you guys have bottles with you, but if you look on our bottle and our label, and indeed the kind of secondary box outside it, you'll see island population 161. So that was at the last census. It was probably gone up a little bit since then, but maybe by 2 or 3 people or something like that. So yeah, we're a small place. The island's actually the same size and shape as Manhattan Island in the US, which you guys will be familiar with. It's about 13 miles long, about 3 or 4 miles wide at the widest part, but yeah, home to only 161 rather than, I think, official 1.61 million residents on Manhattan. So there's a lot more space. We started production, as I said, September 2017, and we set out to create what we kind of identify as a Hebridean style of single malt. So the Hebrides is the name for the islands on the west coast of Scotland, and we wanted to create what we called a Hebridean style of single malt. So for us, that was lightly peated, so light smoke, and fruity as well. So we kind of use the kind of simple flavor descriptor for our Isle of Raasay single malt as lightly peated, balanced with rich dark fruit flavors. So light peat and dark fruit, and we can get into some of the details about how we achieve that flavor profile, as we go through the single malt. I'm going to also use a few kind of backgrounds here, because it's actually it can be quite good to show everybody what exactly it's at the distillery, the kind of things that we do there. We clearly have the production side of things, but we also have a visitor center, and we do tours, tastings, all that kind of stuff. But we also have 6 ensuite bedrooms there. So if you're ever traveling to Scotland, either this year or anytime in the future, you can stay with us and have a kind of whiskey-filled weekend on Raasay. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. And so yeah, the business was co-founded by my father, Bill Dobby, and Alistair Day. Bill is our executive chairman, and Alistair is our master distiller. Both of them came together in 2015 to build the Isle of Raasay distillery, and started production 2017. We had our first single malt in November 2020, and then we had our first shipment coming to the US just kind of in the first half of last year. So we're quite new in the US, but we're really looking forward to spending a lot more time with whiskey consumers, whiskey lovers in the US, and kind of telling the story across the country. So this is probably one of our first. I think we did one tasting a month or so ago, but this is probably one of our first tastings that we've done in the US, and I'm actually coming to visit Sam and the team at near the end of March as well. So we're really looking forward to hopefully you guys learning a bit more about what we're doing. Anyway, since it's the evening for you guys, I'm sure you're a little bit thirsty. So please feel free to open the first dram. So this is the Isle of Raasay single malt, which is really our kind of signature, our core style, at the Isle of Raasay distillery. And so, as I was saying before, light peat, balanced with rich dark fruit flavors. So hands up if does anyone here actually have a bottle with them, or have you got small sample bottles? Small sample bottles. Okay, well, I'll kind of show and tell then with the bottle as well. So I've just poured a little glass here. And so the Isle of Raasay single malt, as I said, it's a Hebridean style of single malt. So our closest distillery is actually Talisker, is like just over there, about 9 miles as the crow flies. So I'm sure you're all aware of Talisker. It's got that kind of, light smoke to it as well. And just on the nose there, you probably initially pick up, a little bit of smoke, a kind of wisp. We are a peated dram. We're an island distillery, but we're not necessarily as heavy peat as kind of some island distilleries that people commonly associate with peat. So we talk about light peat, light smoke, and you probably also there getting some of the fruitiness. Yeah, this Jane here has just commented, so much fruit on the nose. So you really get that kind of, and it's quite, to be honest, a lot of Scotch whiskey, people talk about kind of apples and pears and these kind of orchard fruits. We are really going for something a little bit different, something a little bit more unique. We're going for what we kind of call dark fruits, but what we mean by that is cherries, black currants, and so on. And you'll see one of the single casks we have tonight is an export or red wine cask. Some of those export or red wine casks is what's bringing that kind of fruity characteristic into the whiskey. So on the nose there, yeah, a little bit of light smoke, a lot of fruitiness. But yeah, exactly. Vadim here is saying not medicinal, and that's really important for what we are doing. We are a peated whiskey, yes, but it's not necessarily Isla peat. Isla peat is, famously known for its medicinal kind of iodine characteristics. We use Highland peat, and actually for some very small batches we use Raasay peat, but we use Highland peat predominantly in our production, and Highland peat has more of a smoky characteristic associated with it. So I always use the word smoke when I'm describing the kind of flavor from Highland peat, and it's more that kind of bonfire smoke, maybe kind of burning logs. It's less kind of first aid kit. So yeah, on the nose there. And then, as I said, I hope you don't mind. Well, I may have a little bit. It's 4 a.m. But yeah.
Just remember your college days. 4 a.m. is still partying and not up in the morning yet.
Exactly.
It's still,
I must admit, I have been to sleep, guys. I promise.
So it was a nap, a power nap. It's all good.
You can't say you've been drinking all day if you don't start in the morning.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Jason here as well, a little bit of heather, floral bits. Yeah, so it's really that light peat fruitiness. Cheers to that, John. It's always 5 o'clock somewhere. So yeah, on the palate, so up front, a little bit of spiciness, a little bit of fruitiness, and a kind of warmth of smoke, rather than a kind of, cigar ash or kind of, really, really heavy smoke. It's kind of, I always view it, for me anyway, as a kind of warmth that comes up after you kind of first sip the whiskey. I'm going to spend probably a disproportionate amount of time on this dram, and then we will go into the single cask, but I really want to have a good conversation about it. So, if you guys, continue to just, nose, taste, I'll maybe talk a little bit more about the whiskey. And, as Vadim said at the start, I'd love to, hear some questions and, let's have a little bit of a discussion about it. So, yeah, we when we were kind of creating the Isle of Raasay single malt, we obviously, hadn't made whiskey before in the sense of distilled it. Alistair Day, our master distiller, has a bit of a family background in blending and bottling. So he had made some whiskies before, with third-party liquid, but we hadn't distilled or matured our own whiskey. So it was a new thing for us. And, we wanted to create something different. We wanted to stand out. We wanted to, make the Raasay dram identifiable. Some of these kind of iconic whiskies that when you drink it, you're like, boom, I know what that is, and so, and we wanted it to be a Hebridean style of whiskey, which for us, again, lightly peated and fruity. And so when we kind of came up with created the recipe for the Isle of Raasay single malt, we decided to produce both heavily peated and unpeated spirit. And we do that kind of 50% of the year we produce heavily peated spirit, 50% of the year we produce unpeated spirit. So we kind of change every 3 months, every quarter, we change from heavily peated to unpeated campaigns. And we mature that, and I'm gonna zoom is always a bit funny with backgrounds, but maybe you can see the label here. I'm going to mature, we mature that in 3 different cask types. So ex-rye whiskey casks from Kentucky, from the US. Also virgin chinkapin oak casks. Chinkapin is the common name for Quercus muhlenbergi, which is a species of North American oak. And then also ex-Bordeaux red wine casks, obviously from France. So those 3 cask types, and you've got 2 of them this evening to taste the kind of 2 of the single cask components of our single malt. But those 3 cask types, if you imagine the 2 spirit types are going into the 3 cask types separately, matured separately, and then married together when we come to bottling to produce that one style of single malt. So there's 6 different components, 6 different cask components, which create the Isle of Raasay single malt. And you'll see here on the label, actually, oh, I've disappeared. You'll see here on the label, we kind of draw out the 6 different components. So if and when you do get a hold of a bottle, you can see quite clearly the cask types that are going into the single malt. And lots of people ask, okay, why do you do that? Because it's quite different to a lot of Scotch. As you guys are probably aware, maybe 90% plus of Scotch whiskey is matured in ex-bourbon casks. Some in ex-sherry casks. Obviously there's a few other cask types used, but really 90% plus of Scotch whiskey is matured in ex-bourbon casks. And when we, set out to make the Isle of Raasay single malt, we knew that clearly we wanted to create the best single malt we could. We wanted to create a single malt that has complexity, balance, and depth of flavor, even at your kind of non-age statement, kind of stage. So your sort of 3, 4, 5, 6-year-old stage, and into the older years. So and into the kind of 10, plus year-old whiskies. We're not there yet, but yeah, we wanted to create a single malt which had complexity, balance, and depth of flavor throughout its whole kind of life cycle. And we felt to ourselves, look, if we do what most distillers do in Scotland, which is produce one spirit type predominantly and put it into one cask type, mainly bourbon, we thought to ourselves, and we actually still believe, that at that 3 to 6-year-old stage, you just wouldn't get the kind of complexity, balance, layers of flavor that we believe that we've achieved with the Isle of Raasay single malt. So, it was actually, you heard me before saying that Alistair, who's my colleague and our master distiller, had a family background in blending. It's actually taking a little bit of a leaf out of that book and, producing a couple different styles of whiskey, maturing it in a few different cask types, and bringing, different flavor elements from different types of spirit essentially together to create a single malt. So, you know, for us, that brings complexity into the single malt. It brings kind of depth of flavor. You know, you have layers of flavor. You've got the 2 spirit types, the unpeated and the heavily peated. You've got the 3 cask types, the ex-rye whiskey cask, the Chinkapin oak cask, and the ex-Bordeaux red wine cask. And, you know, bringing them all together, you know, in various proportions, and the proportions, maybe I can go into at the end. It's, you know, it's no secret. We like to be quite transparent about it. So we bring those together in different various proportions to produce that signature style, lightly peated, which, you know, no prizes for guessing how we do that. Heavily peated and vatted with unpeated spirit, and rich dark fruit flavors. So those red wine casks, and I would add everything I'm talking about here, we fully matured the spirit in. These aren't finishings or anything like that. Fully matured for the whole kind of life cycle. And so we, you know, we bring all those together. The ex Bordeaux red wine casks bring that fruity element that you can probably pick up. You know, I think somebody at the start was saying that, yeah, you get a lot of fruit on the nose, a lot of fruit on the palate. That's those Bordeaux red wine casks, you know, cherries, black currants, you know, fruits that you would associate commonly with, you know, a big Bordeaux red wine. Got a question here, so I'll just pause a sec and pick this one up. Let me just see. Was the While We Wait release matured in the same ex-Bordeaux cask? So to give a little bit of context here, and I guess, you know, maybe a quick kind of show of hands, who here before tonight had heard of the Isle of Raasay distillery? Who's kind of got, so there's quite a few, but some of you also haven't. So I'll give a little bit of context as to what this question is. So when we started distilling September 2017, as I said. Clearly whiskey being whiskey, Scotch whiskey has to be at least 3 years old. So we weren't going to be selling anything till at least 2020. And we haven't been in the whiskey business before. We actually pride ourselves with saying that nobody in our company has ever worked at a whiskey distillery. So we're quite we're doing our own thing, put it that way, and we're kind of carving our own path. And so, you know, we thought to ourselves, hey, look, we want to be able to understand, you know, how to make whiskey, how to kind of blend casks. We also wanted to understand how we're going to sell whiskey, you know, distribute it. And equally, we wanted to get the name, you know, the Raasay name out there, get people kind of understanding a little bit about what we're trying to do. So we created it was essentially an independent bottling, so third-party liquid sourced bottling called Raasay While We Wait, which, as it says on the tin, was a kind of liquid that we, you know, kind of had people consume ahead of our single malt being ready from the distillery. And so what we did here was we essentially created the style of whiskey that we were hoping to create from the Isle of Raasay distillery. We called it Raasay While We Wait, and we used that to kind of go out and explain to people, you know, what we're trying to do, the flavor profile that we were aiming for. And what that was ex-Bordeaux, that was ex-bourbon casks from another distillery, a Highland distillery, that were peated, but still lightly peated. And it was finished in Tuscan red wine casks. So as opposed to the Bordeaux red wine casks, we finished Raasay While We Wait in Tuscan red wine casks. Reason for that is we have still a relationship with a Tuscan vineyard near a place where actually I used to go on holiday, and that's how we know them in Tuscany. So that's why we used those casks. So it was something which we did at the start, you know, used as a way to explain to people the style of whiskey we were planning to, you know, to create. But we've since discontinued that product. So to answer John's question, was the while we wait release matured in the same ex-Bordeaux red wine casks? No, we've used new casks for the distillate from the distillery. So main reason is we wanted to use first fill casks. So obviously, you know, if they'd had the while we wait in it, they would have been second fill. And we wanted to use first fill casks, which actually explains a little bit about our thought process with the single malt as well. So remember I said that we wanted to create a single malt with that complexity, balance, and depth of flavor. So all casks that we are filling, or all casks that we filled until our first batch of single malt, were all first fill casks. So first fill essentially means, for those who may not know, essentially means it's not had a whiskey in it before, or kind of, and you know, it could have had the red wine in it before, or bourbon or something like that. So yeah, I guess it could have had whiskey in it before, but it's not had Scotch whiskey maturing in it before. And so what that means is the wood is more active than it otherwise would be if it had already gone through a kind of maturation with Scotch whiskey. And what that means is you get a lot more influence from the cask kind of early on in its life cycle. So particularly the Chinkoping casks, which are virgin casks as well, you know, you get a lot of influence from the oak early on. And for our kind of non-age statement, core Isle of Raasay single malt, which is at the moment 3 to 5 years old, will be older as we go. But we wanted that to have first fill casks only being used, so that there was kind of, you know, more influence from the oak than you would get if it was second fill or third fill. That being said, lots of people ask, okay, what's your kind of aged whiskey plan? And so all the batches that we are emptying now, so, you know, if you imagine there was maybe something like 70 casks went into our first batch, they were emptied. When we refill those, they then become second fill casks. They then go away and they mature for kind of 8 years plus for the, call it, older versions of the Isle of Raasay single malt. So those second fill casks, they're a little bit more, the wood's a bit more inert. They're great for putting away for kind of 8, 10 plus years. And so they'll actually end up becoming being vatted in to be the kind of older versions, if that's the right word, of the Isle of Raasay single malt. So it means that, you know, the first fills are all going to be, and they all probably always will be, you know, this kind of core, you know, Isle of Raasay single malt. You guys are probably familiar with Cohoman and other distilleries that have really championed non-age statement whiskey, and I think really proven that, you know, young whiskey doesn't mean bad whiskey, and old whiskey doesn't necessarily mean good whiskey. And so, you know, we're probably always going to have the Isle of Raasay single malt in the kind of way it is today. And then we will do older versions. Not sure if we will age, you know, use like a big age statement or something like that, but we will do older versions and tell people that, you know, in the future. And that'll be all the casks we're emptying right now to create batches of the Isle of Raasay single malt are going to go away and become that. A couple more questions I'll go into, but I guess just pausing there, how, you know, any thoughts on the dram itself? Any thoughts on that flavor profile that we are looking for? Did we manage to do it or not do it, or, you know, any kind of comments on that front? Okay, I'll take silence as a good thing. So we'll go on to some of the questions, and really love the mouthfeel. Thank you, Daniel. Yeah, that creamy mouthfeel. So a couple things there. We've got the ex-rye casks so I can, on the single casks, what I'm going to do is go more into the detail of exactly those casks and why we chose them. But for the ex-rye casks, what we're looking for there is a kind of spiciness up front, so you probably get that little bit kind of spiciness on the palate up front, but then you get your kind of classic vanillas and butterscotch that you may associate with bourbon casks. and you know, they give you that kind of mouthfeel, as do the Chinkopin casks. So I will also talk about Chinkopin oak. I'm not sure when I'll do it, but I'll do it maybe at the end of the 2 single casks, because it is the 3rd piece of our recipe, and it's an important part of what we're doing. But the Chinkopin oak casks as well, so they're virgin casks. They're North American white oak, but they're not Quercus alba, which is kind of typically what people would be buying from North America. So most bourbon and rye casks are Quercus alba in terms of the species of oak. Sometimes they can get a little bit of a bad name with the use in Scotch whiskey. The virgin, using those virgin casks occasionally can be a bit kind of tannin heavy. You know, if used a little bit in the wrong way, can be a bit aggressive on the spirit. But Quercus muhlenbergi, which is also known as Chinkopin, is a sweeter oak. So what we've done, they're high char, high toast, so that caramelizes the natural sugars in the wood, and it creates a kind of quite a sort of toffee caramel sort of flavor characteristic on the spirit. I think here there was a question from Jane just up a little bit, which Jane was saying, did the pandemic delay your release at all? Strangely enough, it didn't. We thought it would. I think, like most people, in March 2020, we didn't really have a clue what was about to happen. So we were, for want of a better word, shitting ourselves ahead of kind of releasing our whiskey. We, you know, as I said, we were a new distillery, new venture. You know, we had invested a lot of time and effort, you know, and invested financially clearly in this project, and you know, that was pretty nerve-wracking when suddenly, you know, your sort of plans to launch your first ever whiskey ever, there's a global pandemic. And you know, while I think in hindsight we all know that you know, some channels did very well, like retail, independent retail particularly, and maybe the same in the US, but you know, people were drinking better spirits at home, and you know, kind of experimenting with new things, and you know, kind of stuff like that. So the independent retail, which is a big channel for us in the UK, actually went very well in the end, as did obviously online sales. So but you know, in March we didn't know that was going to be the case, and so we were really worried about what was going to happen. That said, we kind of hustled together, and you know, we've got a great team and a great set of people who are very committed, and you know, and really passionate about what they do, including we have a fulfillment team on Raasay. So if I just maybe I'll choose a different background here. Hold on one second. Yeah, you'll see here on the hill behind me. On the hill behind me here, you'll see there's a warehouse up at the top of the hill. We actually do all of our bottling and vatting, and bottling, and our fulfillment from there. So we ended up, you know, selling quite a lot online during the pandemic, and it was a bit of a shock because we hadn't really done much of that before, or any of that, and suddenly we had sort of hundreds, if not thousands, of parcels to kind of suddenly package up and send off from Raasay. And so it was quite a shock when suddenly you get this whole list of orders and you're like, oh shit, what are we going to do? So
did you ever discuss why Raasay? It doesn't seem like the most practical place to build a distillery. Yeah.
Why don't I go into that? So I guess going a little bit more into our founding story. So we, you know, as I was saying at the start, 2 co-founders, Bill Dobby and Alistair Day, and you know, both came into whiskey kind of in different ways. So when so I'll start with Alistair, and I'll then go on to Bill. So Alistair has a family background in whiskey. you know, and he actually has worked in whiskey to an extent to the back to 2009. And so Alistair's great grandfather was a blender and bottler in the Borders in Scotland, so in Coldstream, which is right down south in Scotland near the border, in sort of the late 1800s. And he had a blending and bottling kind of shop, grocery shop, and he over, you know, obviously Alistair didn't meet him in person, but what he did do is pass down a recipe book, a cellar book, which was essentially the sales ledger from the blending and bottling grocers, and so that got passed down the family. And when Alistair used to work in the food industry, and his dad, you know, passed down the cellar book to him, and had a kind of, you know, said to Alistair, hey, you know, if you can take the cellar book, but please do something with it. So Alistair then in 2009 recreated one of the blends from that cellar book that his great grandfather would have been making in his grocery shop. And so he recreated a blend which was called the Tweeddale, and that was a quite an old Scotch whiskey, so it's blended Scotch, and I think, you know, the last one that was released, which was a few years ago now, was 28 years old, and so Alistair spent quite a few years purchasing third-party liquid, blending and bottling it to kind of recreate this historic blend from his family. And over time, you know, clearly sourcing 28-year-old liquid became harder and harder. And so Alistair kind of thought to himself, hey, you know, I'd like to start to distill my own spirit, you know, to be able to source whiskey and to be able to have a kind of continuous supply, you know, as distilleries kind of had less and less aged whiskey available. And so Alistair wrote a business plan to create a distillery in the Borders down in Scotland, and was kind of going around trying to find a partner for creating that business. Meanwhile, my father Bill, so he is a kind of, for want of a better word, an entrepreneur, has been for kind of 30 years, various businesses over the years, some in technology, some in other things. And he wanted to create a long-term family business with myself, you know, that would kind of be in our family for hopefully for generations. And when you ask yourself, and you're Scottish, and you go, you know, what's a good long-term family business in Scotland, and something which Scotland is good at, you know, he landed on whiskey, and so he actually, you know, kind of meanwhile was also wanting to build a distillery, and he was out with his friends. So one of his best friends, Ian Hector Ross, who's actually still works with us today, he's in my team. He's a brand ambassador for the distillery. And if you go on our Instagram or Facebook and you actually look at our last post, you'll see Ian there in the warehouse speaking in Gaelic, because it was International Gaelic Week last week. And so he was the man who came up with the idea of building a distillery on Raasay. And the reason for that is his wife was from Raasay. And when my dad and Ian were talking and going, my dad said, hey, you know, I'm thinking of building a distillery. Half his friends said, you're mad. Ian said, great idea. I know the exact place, and took my dad up to Raasay when it was kind of thundering with rain in a January in it must have been about 2014, and you know, showed him the spot and said, you know, what do you think? And I think both of them thought, yeah, this, you know, the penny dropped, and they thought this is a pretty cool idea. So Dad and Alistair had met each other kind of in this over this period of time. They both liked each other. They were both Scottish. There's not that many distilleries anymore owned by Scotsmen, and probably less than 10 out of the 150 or so in Scotland. And so anyway, my dad then said to Alistair, you know, hey, look, the Borders idea sounds interesting and something which we should still pursue in the future. And as a company, we are still going to probably pursue something there down the line. But he, you know, he also said, you know, but I think you should come look at this place, Raasay, you know, because it's an amazing island. It's one of the only islands in Scotland that doesn't have a distillery. It was, you know, one which we, you know, had a connection to via Ian and his wife. And it's an amazing kind of location, amazing view. And, you know, it's also somewhere that whiskey used to be, you know, made on. So Raasay's got a long history of illicit distilling. And so anyway, they thought, hey, you know what, this is actually perfect. And, you know, Alistair, my dad took Alistair up and said, what do you think? Do you think we can build a distillery here? And they both sort of, I think, looked at each other and thought, yeah, this is not bad. So that's the why Raasay. And you're right, Vadim, it's certainly not the easiest place to operate. You know, I'm there probably 2 or 3 times a month easily. So I can say that I kind of live on the train and live in the car sometimes. But yeah, it's an amazingly, you know, kind of beautiful place. It's remote and it's you know, kind of secluded, and it's just, yeah, super chilled out and a lovely place to be. Okay, I'm going to kind of go on to the next dram, I think. So why don't we, I guess, any final comments on the single malt? I think it's important to say this is.
There was a good question earlier on the ABV of this one. Why 46.4? Why not 46 or 47?
So I'll give you the real answer here. So, you know, we wanted to bottle our single malt at over 46% ABV. And for us, that was super important for the flavor profile. It was super important for, you know, kind of just creating a quality single malt. And so, but that being said, before we released the single malt in the pandemic, and this is the behind the scenes answer, we did a tasting with the Whiskey Exchange in the UK. So you guys probably are aware with that of that e-commerce site. And we were on an islands tasting, and this was before we even had whiskey, right? So we created a kind of work in progress dram, kind of a kitchen vatting to put into this because the Whiskey Exchange asked us to do it, and we thought, okay, this is clearly a great opportunity to get the name out there. We were in a box with Highland Park, Arran, you know, I think Jura might have been in there, Tobermory, and Talisker. And so we thought to ourselves, you know, this is a good opportunity to kind of talk about our whiskey. It was an online tasting because it was during the pandemic. And when we got the box back, we saw the other whiskies and they all had decimal places in their ABV, and we didn't. And we thought, what's that all about? And so we kind of looked into it a bit more, and we thought, you know, we thought to ourselves, look, it's kind of unique if you have your own sort of almost your own ABV. And we knew we wanted to be around, you know, above 46% ABV, but we didn't really want to be above 47 plus. So, you know, it'd probably be false to say that 0.1 of a percentage point makes a difference in flavor. So we actually, we were in the office and we were with Chloe, she's our manager of our visitor center. And we said, Chloe, pick a number between 1 and 10. And she went 4, and we went 46.4. So that's why that happened. It's actually, in hindsight, also quite good because when it's in the batting tank, so it can lose its ABV. The whiskey can lose its ABV when you leave it in the batting tank to marry, and because the alcohol can start to evaporate. And so when we marry the whiskey, because we're bottling above 46%, we've actually got a little bit more leeway as well. In, you know, if we lose a bit of ABV, it doesn't drop below 46. So there's a kind of nice sort of reason in hindsight why it's good to do as well. So yeah, 46.4 is where we landed. And yeah, it's, you know, important to say that all our whiskies will be bottled at 46% plus. our core single malt at 46.4, as I just said. Anything else will either be higher than that or natural cask strength. All our whiskies are also natural color, non-chill filtered, which I always forget to say because it almost seems kind of obvious or something that we just would never dream of doing, but it's important to put out there. And equally, all of our distillation, all of our maturation, and all of our bottling is all done here. So everything is done on the Isle of Raasay. We don't outsource anything, with regard to bottling or anything like that. And what that means really is not only can we focus on the quality control and quality of production at every stage, but it also employs, we've now got a team of 30 plus on the island employed at the distillery, which is 20% of the island. And it's actually more like 50% of the people who are still of working age on the island. So it's a pretty kind of important place in the community as well. Okay, let's move on to the next dram. Unless Vadim, do you want to keep with Raasay or do you want to go back to Pokeno, or how do you want to do this?
Sam, is Matt good or here, or do you want to keep going with this?
So let's keep going with Raasay. Matt will meet us, join us probably like 10-15 minutes. He's got a little bit of a traffic jam, but
No worries. Okay, are we on the ex Bordeaux cask?
Yeah, so let's, sorry, Sam.
And everyone please approach that with caution, because we will go back to 43 in a little bit. So just be gentle to your palate.
Okay, so we're now going to head on to some of the other samples that we have tonight. Yeah, I'm seeing here, Jason, just thinking about how different a whiskey this would be if it was founded in the Borders instead. Yeah, we are still going to, I'll come on maybe at the end to some of our future plans so as not to go in too many directions at once. But yeah, I'll just say that there's definitely plans down the line to build in the Borders. And we have another kind of development as a business as well in Campbelltown. But I'll come on to that later, because as I said, we're probably puts us in too many directions. So moving on to the next dram of the evening, which is our peated ex-Bordeaux red wine single cask. And I'll try not to spend 51 minutes on this dram. I'll go a little bit quicker. But I just thought it was important to really focus on the single malt as well. So as I said, our Isle of Raasay single malt is our flagship product, made up of 2 spirit types and 3 cask types. And this is one of the casks which goes into the single malt. So ex-Bordeaux red wine casks, clearly wine casks from Bordeaux in France. And so if you want to just open that, and I'm really struggling to open mine, but yeah, there you go. So I've got my sample open. You can see here, it's a cask sample. And just pour that. So when I was talking about the flavor profile, lightly peated with rich dark fruits, that second part, this is where these casks really come to play. So that rich dark fruit flavor, you're probably getting on the nose, yeah, big kind of fruity nose. Yes, very unique, very different. Lots of whiskey, as I said, has that kind of apples and pears sort of characteristic, vanilla from bourbon casks. This is a fruity, fruity whiskey. And so, we like to bottle our single cask bottlings to, of the recipe, to give people an idea of what each cask type is bringing to the party. So, the 6 different casks, we actually call it our Nashia 6 cask series. So Nashia means the 6 in Gaelic, and yeah, we call it our Nashia single cask series. So essentially what that's doing is a deconstructed dram. So you're taking the Isle of Raasay single malt. You'll probably see here there's 6 different blobs on the side of the bottle. These are little illustrations of the cask, and we peel each of them out to give people the opportunity to taste the different flavor elements of the casks. And so in the US. So we had the 3 peated. We had them ship first half of last year. So they've obviously arrived as you guys have them. And we just shipped the 3 unpeated. I actually think they're in the US now, but maybe not quite, on shelves or, yet, but I think they may have landed there. We essentially started with the 3 peated, go on to the 3 unpeated, and it's a great way to kind of have people experience the different parts of the recipe and understand actually how unique each cask type is, but when married together creates one kind of harmonious single malt. But you'll taste in a minute the difference between the 3 cask types, and we're tasting rye and tasting the export door red wine, but it's super unique, like none of them taste like each other. And it's also so funny in a tasting when we often do what we call an Ashia tasting, which is the whole 6, which is quite an evening. Sometimes when you taste through all 6 and you ask people what their favorite one is, everyone puts their hand up for different casks. So, which is actually that's the beauty of whiskey, that some people, love the rye, love the red wine, love the chinkapin. Some people are unpeated, some people are peated, but it's kind of cool because what it means is people can, experience Raasay across a whole range of spirit types and cask types. So unpeated and peated, and then the 3 cask types, but then understand that it's all coming together, to be a harmonious kind of single malt. So it's quite obviously an important part of what we're doing. So this the export door red wine cask. So actually not a huge amount of smoke on the nose. I think, big kind of fruit kind of up front. And I would say, by the way, this is bottled at natural cask strength, which I believe this cask, I don't have the single cask bottling that you guys have. I believe this cask is 61.7% ABV, but maybe Sam would correct me if I'm wrong, but it's certainly going to be over 60%. Right. So clearly, pretty high ABV. It's natural cask strength. So you might want to, add a little bit of water as you taste through this, because over 60% ABV is pretty punchy in anyone's books. But we like to, you guys are whiskey lovers. We like to kind of give people the opportunity to dilute themselves to their own preference. Kind of peated up front, and and I'm definitely not going to drink too much of the single cask strength ones, but on the palate you get that kind of smokiness, fruitiness. It's kind of cherries, black currants. That smoke you'll probably taste getting a bit heavier than the single malt itself. A few kind of specifications, I guess, on this single cask. So again, I believe this is single cask number 664 from 2018, which means it was filled roughly midway through 2018, and it was bottled kind of midway through 2022. So it was just coming up to 4 years old, or may actually be 4 years old. I can check the bottling date at the end. You get that kind of, as Jason's saying here, black cherry, pulp fruits. You get kind of a little bit of kind of clove as well, and kind of spice, a little bit of like cinnamon spice. So you've got your peat, you've got your smoke, and you've got your dark fruits as well from the red wine. A few things on our red wine cask while you kind of nose and taste that. And remember, as I said, a few drops of water can really help these single casks open up a little bit. So I'll let you guys kind of add to your own specification as we go. But ex-Bordeaux red wine casks from Theo's. So Theo's asking what type of Bordeaux cask. So we purchased from predominantly 4 chateaus. So Chateau Margaux, Chateau Palmer, Chateau Mouton Rothschild, and Chateau Calon Segur. We do have some red wine casks from other chateaus, but we mainly purchase from those ones. This one here is a Chateau Palmer cask, and it's a first fill cask. And it's important to say that these are fully matured for a start, so they're not finishings, and they're not STR casks. So you'll come across probably STR casks quite a bit in Scotland. Quite a lot of new distilleries actually are using them as well. We're not. We're doing something different. We are using, naturally wet. We call them wet, but wet ex-Bordeaux red wine casks, which means that they come over from France just as they are from the vineyard. So we specify at least 3 vintages of red wine in the cask. So the wine essentially, is well kind of penetrating the oak. And STR casks, on the other hand, STR means shaved, toasted, and recharred. The insides are shaved, toasted, which is in direct heat on the cask, and then charred, which is direct heat on the inside of the cask. We don't do that. We have them wet from France. In fact, we only fill and transport the red wine casks in the winter months. So we're actually filling red wine at the moment. The reason that we do it in the winter months is the last thing you want sitting in Calais in a container in the beating sun is fresh red wine casks. Everyone knows what happens to red wine when it gets a bit hot or lies out in the sun. Not the nicest thing in the world. So we have to be quite careful with the casks. We transport and fill them only in the winter, and purchase them from Bordeaux. Important to say as well, you may see when we talk in our communications, we talk quite a lot about oak species. There's actually 4 types of oak in the Isle of Raasay single malt, and the red. So there's Quercus alba from the rye casks. There's Quercus muhlenbergi, which is that really important virgin oak that we use, which is pretty unique in Scotland. We believe we're the only whiskey distillery in Scotland where you can taste fully matured Chinkapin oak spirit. There's other distilleries recently who have done some finishings in Chinkapin, but we believe we're the only place that you can taste fully matured Chinkapin oak single cask whiskey. So we're quite unique in that. We actually think we were one of the first to fill Chinkapin oak. Some others have been doing it now, but yeah, it's an important part of what we do, and it's an important kind of flavor profile in the whiskey, which as I said, I'll come on to at the end, and then also our ex-Bordeaux red wine casks. So there's 2 types of oak in the ex-Bordeaux red wine casks. There's Quercus Patria and Quercus robur, both European oak. You've got Chinkapin, which is American oak, and Quercus alba, which is also American oak. And the Quercus robur and Patria, super important for what we're doing. It's got that kind of that spiciness. That's what it brings to the whiskey. And actually, we're doing a bit of in the warehouse at the moment. We've got a series of virgin oak, which we're going to kind of, I guess, bottle and release in the future. But it's essentially breaking down the different oak species as well as how we break down the different cask types to then go into kind of then to allow people to see how that is influencing the characteristic of the spirit. So for us, and we believe this is true, it's not just the previous content in the cask that affects the flavor of the whiskey, it's also the species of oak that cask is made from. So yeah, so the red wine cask, Quercus Patria and Quercus robur, European oak, gives that kind of clove, that sort of spiciness, and then also you obviously have the dark fruits from the red wine itself. Just check here if there's any comments here, and water really opens up. Just gonna see here, get another photo. I think that's very creamy without sliding into oily. Pete Knight, thank you very much. Jane and Theo, appreciate those comments. Yeah, it's that real fruitiness. I can see here jams from Theo as well. So yeah, it's that, it's an important part of what we do. But what's interesting despite the fact you get that you obviously taste that fruitiness in the Isle of Raasay single malt. The red wine casks make up only 15%, 1/5 of our recipe. Alistair explains to me, and I must admit, I still don't understand how this works, but he explains to me that essentially when you're blending, the flavor that you want the most of, you put the least of in. So obviously people might think, okay, I want dark fruit flavors from the red wine, so I'm going to make it 60% red wine and then other stuff. But actually, the way Alistair explains it to me is the one you use the least of, you actually can pick up most of the flavor from quite often. A good analogy is like putting black pepper on your food. You don't need much of it, but then you really taste it because it's got a very unique flavor profile. And so that's what we're doing with the red wine casks. We're essentially 15% of our recipes, the fully matured red wine, which essentially adds those kind of top notes of dark fruits to our whiskey. As I said, it doesn't really make any sense, but I guess that's the beauty of it. Bit of brine on the finish too. Yeah, we are an island whiskey. There's great debate about where you mature your whiskey and if that affects the flavor of the spirit. For us, it definitely does. Or at the very least, it's more likely to taste of Raasay if it's maturing on Raasay than if it's maturing somewhere else. So we, believe it's very important to mature everything on site. So 100% of our casks are actually matured in our warehouses. This one here used to be a maturation warehouse until we outgrew it. The casks were literally right up at the door. And then we built 2 new warehouses that you can't see right now. They're about half a mile just down the road next to the coast. 1 dunnage warehouse, 1 palletized warehouse, and we've got space for a racked warehouse as well in the future when we need it. But yeah, we do mature everything on site, and for us that does surely affect the flavor of the whiskey. Casks are porous, air goes in, air goes out. So for me, I don't see how that can't do something to it. But yeah, island whiskey, you kind of do get a bit of that saltiness or brininess, in the spirit. Okay. So any more comments on the ex-Bordeaux red wine cask? Is there anything kind of obvious that I've missed maybe? So yeah, as I said, it was filled mid-2018, bottled just kind of roughly second quarter of 2022. So it might be just about 4 years old. And this one, yeah, 61.7% ABV. Okay, Vadim, shall we move on to the last one?
Let's do it. Let's move on to the next Raasay. We're on the ex-rye cask, right?
Yeah. So we've got our peated ex-rye cask. And final thing, and as I said, I promise I wouldn't take 50 minutes on this cask, but the color, I forgot to talk about the color. But as you can see, it almost, your samples, they may almost look a little bit like a rosé wine. They've got this kind of red tint to them, which is really quite interesting. It starts to, when you initially put the spirit in the cask, it takes on a lot of the red wine characteristic, and then it starts to penetrate into the oak, starts to take on more characteristic from the oak and start to get a little bit more of that kind of copper color, typical whiskey color, if you will. But you'll see here when you look at it, it's really got really kind of attractive and unique looking color to it. Probably not many whiskeys you see with that kind of tint on it. So yeah, it's quite cool to look at. And when you have our 6 Nashia single casks all lined up, seeing the different colors of the casks actually really, it's really quite, there's a lot of contrast between them. You've got a lighter straw colored rye, you've got the kind of red tint on the red wine, and then the Chinkapin casks, which some of you may have seen, are like, super, super dark. So it's cool to look at them all kind of lined up next to each other. Nashia, yeah, sounds like Hebrew. Yeah, it's quite, we wanted to kind of, Gaelic is obviously important for our part of the world, and we wanted to, have a nod to that, but then equally keep it quite simple with the meaning the six. So there's actually a cafe on Skye called Nashia as well in Broadford, which is quite interesting, but nothing to do with our casks, or vice versa. Our casks have nothing to do with the cafe. But yeah, the six, the six casks is something you'll hear us talk about a lot. Okay, going on to the peated ex rye cask. So we're still on peated spirit, and this is ex rye whiskey. So you guys will be pretty familiar with rye whiskey, but yeah, these ones are from Woodford Reserve in Kentucky, and we have been buying some rye casks from other rye distilleries as well. So in our kind of early years, we mainly bought from Woodford Reserve. We still do, but we've also been purchasing some from Sagamore, and we purchased some from Knob Creek, a few from Buffalo Trace, and we probably will be continuing to purchase from those distilleries as well, and Woodford too. We're pleased with how they perform, and they still make up 80+% of our rye casks. But yeah, so on the nose, yeah, you get that kind of vanilla that you commonly associate with bourbon casks. So a kind of bourbon single cask, you get that kind of smack of vanilla. Rye casks have that similar flavor profile from the Quercus alba oak. But a lot of people say, why do you use rye and not bourbon? We use rye because rye also has a spicy characteristic, which bourbon for us doesn't have. And that spiciness that the rye has, that kind of cracked black pepper sort of note, which you probably get more on the palate than the nose, but that cracked black pepper, almost like a wee bit of bitterness and a bit like a kind of pestle and mortar of black pepper, is comes from the rye, and then you do get that kind of vanilla, that butterscotch that you commonly associate with Quercus alba, with bourbon casks. But for us, we get that spiciness as well, which is important to our overall flavor profile. So yeah, on the nose, for me anyway, it's more on the sort of vanilla butterscotchy end of the spectrum. Obviously a little bit of a kind of wisp of smoke in there. It's heavily peated spirit. I should have added, actually, on our heavily peated campaigns, the barley is roughly about 48 to 52, so about 50 ppm, but we take quite a narrow cut at the stills. So in a sort of simple terms, what ends up after you take the 50% barley or not 50%, sorry, it's 5:12 in the morning, the 50 ppm barley, and when you take the kind of cut that we take, you end up with roughly about half of the phenols left in the spirit. So it's roughly about 25 phenol parts per million when it comes off the still with our heavily peated whiskey. And then when we vat that with our unpeated whiskey, we probably bring that down by about half-ish again. So in our bottle of Isle of Raasay single malt, the residual phenols between our batches have actually been anywhere between 6 and 14 phenol parts per million. But our heavily peated spirits about that kind of mid-20s. And so on the palate and just tasting it there, without reducing it initially, you get that hit of fresh cracked black pepper. So a bit of spiciness up front, and then you start to get those more kind of vanilla butterscotchy notes that you might commonly associate with bourbon, and reducing that down as well. I'd advise you guys to kind of reduce it, to your preference, but reducing that down as well, just really, it can mellow out the spirit a little bit, and actually opens up the flavors quite a lot. you know, getting that to that kind of more sort of mid-50s in terms of ABV. This cask, I believe, and as I said, I'm not holding the exact bottles that you guys have, but I think it's cask number 627 from 2018, which means again it's filled about, you know, roughly around the same time as the peated export door red wine cask. And this one here, I believe, 62.4% ABV. So, you know, quite high ABV. We fill at 63.5%, or we fill most of our production at 63.5. We have experimented with some other ABVs, you know, but 90% plus. We're filling at 63.5% ABV. So you'll see, you know, even after almost 4 years, you know, there's not been a huge amount of Angel's share in this one. It must have been sitting at the bottom of the warehouse, probably. And yeah, so we're 62.4%.
What kind of warehousing are you guys doing?
Yeah, so we have both dunnage and palletized. So, and we're going to also, when we need it, build a racked warehouse. So then we've actually got all three types of warehousing, which is quite interesting as well to do, you know, to do a mix. Essentially the way that we do it. So we produce 200,000 litres of pure alcohol per year, which, to put that into context of kind of the size of distillery we are, Talisker, which is 9 miles away, produces, I think, 3.6 million litres of pure alcohol per year. So we're, you know, we're pretty small in our production. 80% of that production is going into our signature recipe. So into the 3 cask types and the 2 spirit types. 20% of that production is, you name it, you know, and so we are trying a lot of different things with the 20%. So we've got fully matured PX casks, Oloroso casks, Palo Cortado, Amontillado sherry. We've got rum, we've got port, we've got a whole virgin series of casks. You know, we've got different types of wine, some dessert wine, and so on. So we've a whole load of stuff which over the years will be coming to the US. But that's our kind of 20%, and that all sits in the dunnage warehouse. So if you guys ever come to Raasay, our dunnage warehouse has that kind of 20% of you know, of special is the wrong word, because our core recipe has really special casks. We always find that quite annoying because our core recipe, we took so much time to select the casks, you know, the chinkapin, the red wine. We didn't just put it all into bourbon casks. And so when we say our special casks in 20%, we really mean our really special casks, because our special casks are already in our core whiskey. And so yeah, that all sits in the dunnage warehouse. And then in the palletized warehouse, we essentially have our non-age statement whiskey will be in the palletized warehouse. So palletized is good for about up to 8 years of maturation. So it's absolutely fine up to about 8 years. You know, so our core recipe, our core non-age statement whiskey will be in the palletized warehouse. And then when we empty that and when we refill those, they're at the moment going into dunnage, but eventually they'll probably sit in the racked warehouse. So we'll have, if you imagine our non-age statement core single malt in the dunnage, so our kind of 8 minus years old. We'll have our 8 plus in the racked of the core whiskey, and then we'll have our 20% of our production in the dunnage warehouse. Just reading a few comments here, Jane. Couple drops of water, soften the pepper at first. Yeah, absolutely. You know, you can kind of, I guess, like always with cask strength whiskey, you know, it can always be interesting to reduce it and taste it at slightly different ABVs. But you know, we'd like to leave that in your guys' hands. Got a question here from Ali. Which of the three is your favorite? Yeah, it's kind of like choosing your favorite children. It's kind of a bit of a difficult one. So actually, you know, I don't want to cop out and say it depends, because that's, you know, but I think, to be honest, probably for me, so I prefer peated whiskey. So there's one way to kind of bifurcate. So I'm probably more a peated whiskey fan just in general than unpeated. And then, you know, I really like the chinkapin casks and the rye casks. For me, I love to be honest, I quite like the simplicity of the rye casks. They're a bit of a dark horse. They don't have as sexy a name as the chinkapin or the ex-Bordeaux red wine, but they're just really kind of spirit forward. So you get a lot of the character of our distillate in the rye casks. But then on the complete other end of the spectrum, I also really like the chinkapin casks because they essentially have one of the most unique flavor profiles that I've come across in whiskey. The peated chinkapin basically tastes like eating barbecue ribs, which is kind of nice. But then I do like the red wine casks and the fruitiness. So yeah, I'll kind of cop out a little bit and say all three, but definitely the peated end of the spectrum for me. Just generally, not even just a Raasay thing, but just generally preferring peated whiskey than to unpeated. But yeah, probably there's my answer. A little bit of a cop out. What are your guys' favorites so far in terms of rye versus red wine? Red wine's definitely a lot more unique, I would say. Like it's a flavor profile that you don't get often in whiskey, and that's what we love with what we do, and particularly the single cask series is both the chinkapin and the red wine. Like you're rarely kind of tasting fully matured whiskey that's been in those cask types. It's not, it's a really kind of rare and unique thing. So we really like the fact that people can do that, and that we like the fact our single cask bottlings are very different to what you would find from a lot of other distilleries. Got Daniel here saying likes it proof down a bit. Yeah, as always, bringing the ABV certainly below 60% ABV, I think is generally kind of opens up the flavors a bit. Curious about the Sagamore. Yeah. We just brought a container of Sagamore casks over, so we won't know for a while how that's kind of how they go with the spirit, but yeah, you're right there. Maybe a little bit more spiciness, and then I'll as a follow up to this, I'll find out exactly what the percentage of rye is in the Sagamore ones that we are bringing over. I don't know off the top of my head, but yeah, I'll maybe send that to Vadim or Sam as a follow up, and then in 3, 4, 5 years from now, hopefully you're still following our progress, and we may have some of those single casks coming over to the US. You can even compare and contrast against the Woodford.
Do you have any pictures of your stills?
Yes, I do. I actually saved down a whole load of photos here for this tasting.
By the way, I have it set up to where you can just share your screen if you wanted to, if that's easier for you.
Yeah, okay. Why don't we?
I mean, you can do your background it looks awesome, but
yeah, I'll do the
screen.
So we have. Why don't I talk a little bit about the distillery? I guess the kind of technical aspects of the distillery. So we produce 200,000 liters per year. We have a 1-ton mash tun, and we produce the whiskey 2 shifts a day. So 6 a.m. till 2 p.m., then 2 p.m. till 10 p.m., 5 days a week, 4 to 8 weeks a year. So that yields about 200,000 liters of pure alcohol, so liters of 100% alcohol every single year. We then have 6 5,000 liter washbacks, fermentation tanks. These are stainless steel washbacks that we have cooling jackets on. These cooling jackets to control the temperature of the washbacks. And then we have 2 stills. You can see one of them here, but we have a 5,000 liter spirit still and a 3,600 liter 5,000 liter wash still, 3,600 liter spirit still, which you can see here on my right. So that's the spirit still here, and then the wash still is, give me 1 second, here. You can see with Duncan standing next to it. If I get out of the way. So yeah, wash stills behind me. So we, like to, we kind of pride ourselves on our distillery view. we like to kind of say we maybe have one of the best distillery views from the stills from any distillery in Scotland. I'm sure lots of distilleries would argue with that, but we believe this is pretty cracking. It looks over to the Cooling Hills on Skye, and in fact, when you come from Skye, just to get to Raasay, what you would do is you would drive onto Skye, and then you get a short ferry, 25 minutes to Raasay. So it's kind of quite easy to get to from Skye. And Skye's a pretty popular place for people to go to in Scotland. But Raasay's got a nice little natural circuit breaker from the ferry, so you don't get too many tourists there. It's quite a nice tranquil environment. Our stills, just to address your question there, Daniel, they're actually they were made in Italy by a company called Frilly. Lots of people ask, why don't you use Forsyth stills? So when we were building our distillery, we naturally, like lots of people do, we reached out to Forsyths, which are kind of probably the more common still makers in Scotland. They told us they had a 3-year wait time because they were building a reasonably significant distillery in Speyside called Macallan. That new kind of Star Wars distillery, kind of mad Star Wars distillery, the Macallan one. So they said, yeah, no problem, we'll do your stills, but you're a bit of a smaller customer, so you'll have to wait 3 years. And so we obviously didn't want to wait 3 years. So we sourced some stills from Italy, from Frilly. And in fact, the 2 other distilleries that use Frilly stills in Scotland, the Isle of Harris distillery, because they were building their distillery at a similar time to us. And without knowing the details, I'm sure they faced the same kind of answer as us from Forsyths. And also Inchderny, which is quite a interesting experimental distillery owned by Macduff. At the moment, they don't release a single malt, but they do produce a lot of different styles of whiskey that go into the blends of Macduff. So those 3 of us use Frilly stills. Maybe a couple others do, but they're definitely the ones that I know do. Okay, just scrolling through the questions here. I'm conscious of time, buddy. What's the kind of plan with on the time front?
So I'm going to launch a quick poll. We're going to do a quick photo and then we'll move on. And if you're hanging out with us to the end, we can open it up for questions for you. But I want to get Matt on as well.
Yeah, no problem.
So one quick thing, let me launch the poll. As we do that, let me tell everyone to raise a glass in case we lose anyone. So everybody got something in their glass. In case anyone has to jump off, I do understand it is a school night for us and it is middle of the morning for some people. So cheers to Sam. Thank you for organizing all this. And William and Matt, thank you for joining us. And all of you, none of this would be possible if you weren't here. So cheers, everyone. Smile to the camera.
Cheers to hold the group.
Cheers.
Lanjavar. Yeah, thank you very much, guys, for joining. As Vadim said, this wouldn't be possible without you. So I really appreciate your support and hopefully see some of you in the US soon.
Wow.
Cheers.
So the poll results are in, and I think you're going to be pleasantly surprised. I'm shocked. What do you think was the favorite for the group?
Look, I must admit, I would hope the single malt's the favorite, but let's see. I think naturally,
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow,
That's great.
that's impressive.
Yeah, well, it's nice to hear. Clearly we love our single cask expressions, but our flagship product, and where we hopefully will become known for is our Isle of Raasay single malt, which you can see here. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, William. As
So-
we transition, go ahead.
I just want my little tiny feedback. The reason I chose the single malt over the other ones is because 46.4%, I think, was the exact perfect ABV. And the other ones took some adjusting. I mean, I
Yeah.
could get them to something that I liked, but it was a little more adjustment on my part. And so for a short tasting when we don't have time to really play too much, I had to go with the single malt. So 46.4, it's a good number. Stick with it.
Well done, Chloe. Well done, Chloe.
Awesome.
you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Kate. Thank you, William. Sam, do you want to introduce our next guest?
William, thank you very much. It was a great way for us to revisit Isle of Raasay. Please join Matt Jones, the person behind a wonderful distillery in New Zealand called Pokeno, and person behind this awesome whiskey. Matt, well,
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hey, Matt, thank you for joining us.
Uh,
This is our first New Zealand distillery, so we're super stoked.
Excellent. Well, listen, you'll have to give me a bit frazzled. It's been a hell of a day today, so it's a good way to end the week though. Cool. Well, look, yeah, delighted to join you guys. So we're going to taste through the range of Pokeno tonight. And yeah, any kind of questions as we go along, put them on the chat, which I can see on the right. I'll talk a bit about the distillery as we go along as well. But probably the best way, I'm guessing, is just to pour the first one and get stuck into it. Or would you guys like me to talk a bit about the whiskey and the distillery first? Which would you prefer?
Let's pour it and talk. We can do both.
Let's pour and talk. Cool. Well,
We're already 2 drams in, so
Yeah,
you
excellent.
got to catch up to us.
I've got to catch up. Good.
We're starting with the origin, right?
Yeah, that's right.
All right, start origin, then we'll do discovery next, and then the double bourbon cask.
Cool, fantastic. So, Pokeno origin, the story behind this. So we've been distilling now for 4.5 years. We laid our first new make down in, I think it was January 2000 no, it was end of 2018. End of 2018, we set the first ones down. What we do in Pokeno is we try and do everything slowly. I had a clear idea when I set the distillery up of the sort of whiskey that I wanted to produce. For my sins, I love a nice, smooth and sweet whiskey. And that was the sort of whiskey that I wanted to distill from the start. So a few things that we do to kind of help that. The pure spring water that we use, we're very lucky that Pokeno is in a valley, so almost below sea level, surrounded by volcanic hills. And our water source is the water that collects from those volcanic hills and comes down to the source below us, and we pipe that directly into the distillery. Very rich in iron, very rich in manganese, cool for distilling. The second thing we do a bit differently as well is, yeah, so fruity. I see the chats there. It's it is. We've got we do a very long ferment. We do an 80-hour ferment. We push it to the limit on the ferment. But the main thing we do differently is an incredibly slow distillation. So we're distilling at about 2.5 liters per minute, which is crazy slow. We're putting very little steam onto the coils. That creates a whole host of difficulties in itself, in the fact that we have to have a special piece of kit called Nogden pump, which comes and blows that condensate out the coils for me to avoid the steam hammer in the stills, but it does allow me to distill really slowly. By distilling slowly, I've got a crazy amount of reflux going on in that still. And I'm probably sitting somewhere between a double and triple distillation, because our collection will start at 77% and it will stop at 72%, whereas a typical double distillation will send you up to about 68% and you'll come down to about 62%. Those kind of 3 things together mean that our new make is incredibly fruity, incredibly fruity. We've got these cool kind of passion fruit, citrus, grapefruity notes on the nose, and that kind of carries through into the origin itself. I don't know even if you guys are getting that on the nose, but I see there's some comments already. And then kind of, you know, what I find on the mouth with the origin is that we've kind of got this incredibly quick maturation in Pokeno. Like I said, we're sitting in this valley almost below sea level, surrounded by these hills, 96% humidity most of the time. New Zealand's kind of 2 distinct islands. You've got the North Island, which is subtropical, and the South Island, which is like the Alps, the ski resorts, etc., and the rest of it. And in the North Island, yeah, we've got this. It is so hot and humid. We will literally get kind of 4 temperatures and 4 seasons in a day. But we're sitting with an angel share of kind of 9.5% per year, which is off the chart. It's something which I've never seen before in 26, 27 years in the whiskey industry. But what it does mean is that after 3.5 or 4 years, and this whiskey is between 3.5 and 4 years old, we're sitting with 35% of the cask gone. So we're sitting with a level of maturity after that short period of time, which is really giving the fatness in the mouth, the smoothness, the sweetness, etc., and the rest of it. And it drinks like a whiskey which is a lot older. I think we're going to get to the point at probably 4 or 5 years where we're taking too much from the cask, because that's where we are. So Pokeno Origin matured in 100% first fill bourbon barrels. It was really, really key for me that I wanted to showcase the profile of the spirit we're doing. For our signature product, I didn't want to hide behind any other casks, so we've gone from the first fill bourbon. It's 100% ex-Jack Daniels casks. They're the select casks we bring over from Brown-Forman. What I find is that, on the nose, we're getting those cool, crazy, vibrant fruit nose. On the mouth, you get that initial hit of vanilla. There's a tiny bit of pepper clove which comes in, and that pepper clove then dissipates and just finishes out with a real kind of fatty and long and powerful mouthfeel. Even though it's a delicate spirit, it's got quite a fatty mouthfeel. I'm going to have a quick taste now because I'm talking too much, but. But yeah, so we mature in palletized warehouses. So we palletize all of our casks. Our maturation is going so quickly anyway that actually if we racked it, we'll probably go even quicker, which we probably don't want. But yeah, it's a real kind of light and sweet and smooth whiskey. But hey, it's the type of whiskeys that I like, so it's the type of whiskeys that I decided to distill. Hey, comments, questions on this one? I'm a bit frazzled tonight, so I'm probably going to be talking all over the place, but.
No worries. This is fantastic. This is. I mean, Raasay was great, but this is the style of whiskey that I personally enjoy as well. So.
Did you say, I'm so sorry if I missed it, what kind of yeast do you use?
So we use Anchor yeast by Lallemand, Distilleries yeast. So it's just a dried yeast. Unfortunately, we are, as we say in New Zealand, we're at the arse end of the world. So it's very difficult to get stuff, kind of thing. So the dried yeast does make it a lot easier for us as well, especially with the subtropical climate and the difficulty with keeping fresh yeast. So the barley strain that we use is Laureate. It's 100% New Zealand grown barley. It's a cool barley for distilling the sort of whiskey that we want to distill. What we do as well is we distill quite warm. So as well as distilling slowly, we're bringing the condensate off at about 24 degrees. And that's obviously, again, very helpful, that green grassy kind of fatty mouthfeel that I'm trying to achieve.
All I can say is you nailed this. I mean, I can't believe this is only 3 or 4 years old.
Thank you.
It just is amazing.
Why 43?
Because it's the personal strength that I kind of like drinking at. It's again, it's kind of, I've kind of decided I'm going to own it. I've made the type of whiskey I like drinking, and I've made it at the strength that I like drinking it at. It's obviously going to be, I know a lot of people are going to
Can't argue with that.
Strength, and yeah, I suppose it's the advantage of owning a distillery.
So does that mean you chill filter before putting it out, or is it non-chill filter?
Yeah, we chill filter this.
Okay.
So for me, it's an interesting question actually to talk about. And I know that I've had many discussions about chill filtering and non-chill filtering, etc., and the rest of it. The key reason that I chill filter is to avoid the minerals reforming in the product and market. New Zealand's a long way from everywhere. There's lots of kind of real cool connoisseurs out there who understand if they're going to find some minerals and some flocculants in the water. A lot of people aren't, and I don't want to have to deal with that from New Zealand. That's one of the key reasons. Another thing in the chill filtration thing as well, for me, it's not whether you chill filter or you don't chill filter, but if you're going to chill filter, it's how you chill filter. So that means that, as I said, we do everything at Pokeno very slowly. So when I am chill filtering, I'm nurturing the product through the chill filtration system. So I will chill filter at 3 liters a minute. Okay, so I'm not pushing that through the system at all very hard. I'm letting it flow through the system nice and gently. So what we're finding, and we do measure, obviously all of our products are natural color. There's no color added to anything we do, but we do measure the color, the turbidity, etc., while we're running it through the chill filtration, and we're stripping almost nothing out of it, even in terms of color, etc., and the rest of it, just because we're going through that thing so slowly.
Wow, that's interesting. I've never heard somebody talking about. I've heard filters being different size and grade and whatnot, but the fact that you're going slower, which makes sense, like, you know, doing a coffee filter and just letting gravity take it, or putting it in a nut bag and squeezing it. It totally makes sense.
Yeah. So for us, I mean, this is our signature product. For me, it really showcases what we're trying to achieve. It shows the vibrancy of the fruit, which I think is really interesting. And I've been having a real kind of think recently as well, why we're getting such vibrant fruit notes compared to some maybe the old world whiskies. And I really believe it's the fact that it's the quick maturation. Because I mean, it would kind of make sense that if you a lot of kind of old world whiskies, when you make the new maker, very fruity, extremely fantastically fruity, some great notes, but put that into a barrel for 12 years, the barrel is gradually going to take over, and some of the vibrant fruit's going to be replaced by some of those soft oak tannins, etc., and the rest of it. Because we're in barrel for such a short time, I think that we're keeping a lot of that fruit forwardness and a lot of that vibrancy, which you can see as well in some of the Indian whiskies and some of the other new world whiskies as well. I think that's going to be a characteristic of new world whiskies, which I think is quite cool at the same time. Kind of differentiates old from new. Any more questions on Pokeno origin, things you'd like to know? Throw it on the chat and I will answer anything I possibly can.
You said origin is exclusively ex-bourbon casks?
Yeah, exclusively first fill bourbon casks. So this has been a first fill bourbon for like I say, probably this version here, probably just over 3.5 years. So I think it's actually, I mean, it's somebody was asking me the question the other day, what am I going to do when I've got older stock at 6, 7, 8 kind of thing? Am I going to evolve origin as it goes? I don't think I am. I mean, I think I'm happy with the way this is drinking. This is what I wanted to achieve for Pokeno Origin. Like I say, I think, you know, I'm already tasting 4.5-year-old spirit, which is losing a bit of the vibrancy of the fruit, and the wood is starting to take over a little bit. So I think, you know, if we do evolve with older products, and at 9.5% per year, there's not going to be a lot of older products because I'm going to be bankrupt if I do that. But yeah, I think I think we've almost kind of, I'm guessing 3 to 5 is going to be the optimum age for our whiskies with that, the kind of evaporation maturation rates that we're seeing. I see the question, how available is this in the US? Sam, do you want to answer that one?
We just launched it in January. It's available now in 9 states, but the plan is to get it at least 30 states by the end of the year. As for Southern California, Mission Liquor usuals, High Time, Mixing Glass, Van Doms, Wine Liquor Depot, or I'll place my email address here if you'd like to let us know where you reside or prefer to shop. We will connect you with a store near you.
Thank you, Sam. John's not in California, but I'll have him reach out to you, or I'll connect you guys.
So I see what's the origin of the name. Really, it's because for us, the whole theme of, and have a look on the website if you get time at www.pokenowhiskey.com, you'll see that the whole theme of the brand is discovery. New Zealand was one of the last countries in the world to be discovered. We're discovering New Zealand single malt. We're the first New Zealand single malt whiskey to launch overseas and launch globally. So yeah, all of our names are around the sense of discovery. So, you know, origin, the beginning, discovery for the sherry product. We have a revelation for a wine-based product, which is coming out. And it's all that sense of discovery, and yeah, discovery of New Zealand, discovery of what we do over here. It's a country that a lot of people don't know very well. Perfect. Are you guys ready to go on to the second whiskey? Perfect. Well, let's go then. Pokeno Discovery. So I don't know if you guys have seen the full bottles before. Holding in front if you haven't, kind of thing. It's a bottle we got developed for ourselves. It's kind of quite, it's got almost kind of quite strong shoulders, quite feminine thing to the body, but really easy to pour, which is the important thing. So Pokeno Discovery, as you can see from the color and guess, this has got a sherry element to it. And when I say sherry element, it is a sherry element because what I was trying to do with all of our products is I want to bring influence to them. I don't want to kill the profile of the new make, which we really, really like. So I wanted those citrus notes to really shine through, even on the products that we have used other cask influences. Something we do differently as well in Pokeno is I'm not a massive fan of finishing. I mean, finishing for me is something which it's kind of quite difficult to manage your profile and get it consistency every time. So what we do is we fill into all of our casks from day one. So we'll fill new make into virgin, new make into sherry, new make into port, into wine, into bourbon, into whatever else we can find over here. And then we do a full maturation in those casks, and after a full maturation that gives me lots of different elements to make up my different whiskies. But what I do, and again, as I said in Pokeno, we do everything slowly. For me, we have an ethos of no compromise in everything we do. So we'll then, we'll put the products together, but we'll then fill them back into cask, and we'll fill them back into a cask for a minimum of 3 months to allow those whiskies to marry together perfectly before we then go and bottle them. And so that's again part of that process. So what we've done here is we've taken a large percentage of first fill bourbon. It's probably about 65 to 70% of full maturation of first fill bourbon casks. And then we've taken a couple of sherries, not just one sherry, but a couple of sherries. I don't know if you guys, do you know what the sherries are already that go in these or not? You don't? Who wants to take a guess at it? Anybody want to take a guess? Nobody wants to go.
PX, Oloroso, maybe some Amontillado.
So PX and Oloroso, nailed. There we go. So we played around at the first time with kind of just one of the sherries, and I wasn't getting the layer of complexity that I was looking for. So what we decided to do was play around with both of them, and we played around with different percentages of both of them, and this went on for quite a long time. And eventually, where we got to was literally almost half and half. So you've got about 65% of first fill bourbon, and then about an equal share of both Oloroso and PX. And what we do is we put that together and then put it back into casks, as I said, to marry for 3 months before. And this is really, for me, it's not a sherry bomb. And we have done a couple of sherry bombs in single casks, but it's almost, I find almost a sherry bomb is too easy to make. And so I was looking for something where I could have that citrus influence at the start, but then would develop with the sherry notes afterwards. So who's getting those citrus notes still on the nose? I mean, you don't have to agree with me. Thanks, Jane. I saw that.
I like that it isn't a sherry bomb, like you said. That's something that I know some people, Vadim, really, really love. But it's nice to have a hint of that dark fruit and without having it overwhelm and become sulfury.
Yeah, thank you. It's kind of what I like about it is you've got those kind of slight nuances of the savory kind of Oloroso notes coming in, which I quite like at the start before the PX kicks in and then starts taking over a little bit, because it's quite difficult to hold PX back. But even with the PX kind of thing, it's not overawing the product. You have got that long finish, but it's not just PX. There is other stuff there as well, which I find quite interesting. Yeah, orange flower and citrus is, I'm saying there, Jane, it's, orange flower and citrus is really good. We kind of alternate. It's funny with our citrus notes, depending on which other cask influence we put in, we kind of go in between grapefruit, lemon, and orange rind. It seems to mix between the three, which I find quite interesting at the same time as well. But it was good comment as well that you said there, because people who I've taken it into people who in the US mostly, there's a lot of tendency towards the sherry bombs. It's we've been got used to the sherry bombs over there, and a lot of people going, actually this is quite cool. It's not a sherry bomb, but yes, there are other influences there. You still get the sherry notion, and it's actually a really interesting whiskey to pair with food. because it's not over dominating on the sherry.
What is New Zealand known for? Like, this is the first experience I have with New Zealand anything. So what would you
It
say
was
is-
actually really interesting, because I actually did this morning I was doing a podcast with David Levine, and he was kind of nosing and tasting the origin, and he actually said something which I'd never actually thought about before. We are known for Kiwis, the All Blacks as well. We're pretty good at rugby. But he said something which is interesting. He goes, "This reminds me of the New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc." He says, because New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc is really citrusy and grapefruity and the rest of it. And I went, that's true, actually. And it's not kind of done on purpose, etc. and the rest of it. But yeah, you know, New Zealand is well known for that. New Zealand's, I mean, what's New Zealand well known for? It's pure environment. You know, it's fantastically mountains, pure water, great scenery, really pure and healthy environment, etc. You know, fantastic natural resources. And I think that's, you know, it's almost Scotland on steroids to a certain point, how I describe it. Lord of the Rings, yeah, very true. The Hobbit as well. The TV series is on Amazon again at the moment, but apparently they're filming the second season in the UK, not in New Zealand, which we're not very happy about. Yeah, apparently. But yeah, so for us, it was, you know, it was a challenge as well building a distillery in New Zealand, because there was no infrastructure. There is no history of distillation in New Zealand, so we're kind of almost starting from the start. I see you talking about the Omavuri whiskey, which is that was interesting, because there's been no real distillation in New Zealand since 1990. There used to be an old distillery, the Wilson's Distillery, that belonged to Seagram at the time. And they sold that in 91, I think it was. And the distillery was mothballed straight away. The stills were pulled out. They were sent to Fiji to make gin. And the distillery was closed down. There was a certain amount of stock that was left. And that was bought by a private investor, who then on-sold that in, I think, the 2006, 2007, to a Tasmanian investor who brought out the New Zealand Whiskey Collection. And they've been releasing that older stock, which was distilled back in the 90s, etc., and the rest of it, under the New Zealand Whiskey Collection, which I'm guessing is what you tasted with the Omavurian, I think. But yeah, so apart from that, there's probably 4 of us making whiskey in New Zealand. Pokeno is by far the largest single malt distillery in the country, but you also have 2 or 3 other real cool craft distilleries who are making some cool stuff as well. So there's a bit of a movement going on, which is cool. But yeah, a little passionate craft industry which is starting.
As soon as you get Sauvignon Blanc, now I taste it. Anything aging in a Sauvignon Blanc cask?
We have, yes. It won't be ready yet, and I didn't actually know, because I'm not a massive white wine fan either, but I kind of went, I'll try it. So we have got some stuff sitting away which will be ready probably. We actually filled new make in them, because like I say, I'm not a massive fan of finishing, so we threw some new make in probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. So we've still got another year and a half to go till that'll be ready. We are going to do some cool stuff with casks though. One thing I didn't mention is that there's been no coopering in New Zealand for 30 years, which is incredible to think when you think about the wine industry and the rest of it. And so that really annoyed me. I'm a bit OCD, and I kind of do things. If I do something, I do it to the end. So we built a cooperage. But then once I built a cooperage, I realized I needed a cooper. So we brought over a master cooper from Scotland, which wasn't easy with immigration, but we got him over eventually. So we now also have the only fully functioning cooperage in New Zealand, which is in the distillery as well. So we're able to make our own casks. We're able to, and not only out of oak as well, because we've just written the New Zealand legislation for single malt whiskey. And that's going to say maturation in casks for a minimum of 2 years, very similar to the Australian. Copper pot stills, matured, distilled and bottled in New Zealand. But one thing we have left open is the casks. We've not specified oak. So that means that we can actually experiment with some native wood casks, some cool stuff, etc., and the rest of it. So at the moment, we're kind of making casks out of native wood, which is fun, because it's kind of, you go, okay, which wood is going to bend? And if it does bend, which wood is going to be not too porous and stuff like that. So we're having a bit of fun on the side to try and see what we make casks out of as well, which is yeah, it's fun. It's good.
I bet it was easier to wrangle 4 distilleries together than 50 like Anna's been doing.
You'd be surprised. You would be surprised. There's always personalities involved. So it's but it's hey, that's what makes the industry as well. If there weren't personalities, the industry wouldn't be so much fun. Are there any questions that people have got me for me while we're on this, etc.? I much prefer you giving me talk points than me just making things up and warbling on.
So another thing that New Zealand is known for is lamb, of course,
Yes.
right? Sheep. So how does your whiskey pair with lamb?
I've never tried to be honest
for
with you.
eating, not for hanging out with.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that actually, because you can actually buy New Zealand lamb where you are cheaper than I can. It's like many industries that are famous for that. The New Zealand lamb in New Zealand is just out of price. It's crazy. I used to, when I was living in the UK many years ago, I could buy the frozen leg of New Zealand lamb for half the price the guys in New Zealand could actually buy it. It's for me, I tend to, when I pair our whiskies, I pair them with seafood. I love those kind of citrusy notes that come out with the seafood, etc., and the rest of it. I'm a massive fan of crayfish. So crayfish is the New Zealand version of a lobster. It's probably between a longoose and a lobster. And you have that grilled with a bit of coriander, garlic, and stuff like that. And that on the Pokeno origin for me is a winner every time kind of thing. Cheese, I think, is a good one as well. I see that in there. Cheese, yeah, is pretty good. Probably not too powerful a cheese. Don't overpower the whiskey, but yeah, that's a good one. Is there a nice dry manchego? Yeah, good idea. Is there things that people would like to know before we go on to the last whiskey about the distillery, about what we're doing? I mean, I've talked about the maturation a little bit. I've talked about the cooperage. Is there stuff I've not touched on?
Why whiskey? How did you get into this?
Oh, I've been in the whiskey industry for 27 years. It's all I know how to do. So yeah, I don't like necessarily talking about my past in the whiskey industry, but I'll touch on it really, really briefly. So I was at Glenmorangie for 10 years and I ran Tullibardine for 14.
Wow.
So yeah, so I've been around whiskey a long time. We've been living in New Zealand for 13 years now. So after a while I got tired of traveling from New Zealand back to Scotland. It's a long way to go. So yeah, so we decided to make the distillery. I see. What's the production volume? Good question. So I heard William talking about Raasay before. We're probably half that. So we've got a half-ton mash tun. So we will put 550 kilos of barley through a half-ton mash tun. 2,700 liters of water go in there. We have 4 3,000-liter fermenters. We have a 3,800 liter wash still, and we have a 3,400 liter spirit still. So we've oversized the spirit still to allow us to do 2 wash distillations for a spirit distillation, just to be a bit more sustainable on the energy side. So as far as capacity is concerned, we've probably got a theoretical capacity at the moment of about 120,000 over a year. We're not distilling that because we don't need to. I mean, there is no, unlike Scotland, there is never going to be a grain distillery in New Zealand. It's not big enough, which means there's no requirement for malt, for blended whiskies, etc., and the rest of it. So, and we don't do, we've been very kind of focused on this, is I've refused to do any founders casks. I've refused to do anything like that. So we are literally just distilling for the brand. We're in the fortunate situation. It's 100% family owned. We own the business. We financed it ourselves, and that means we're masters of our own destiny, which means we can do what we want, which is great, which is cool, which is what I wanted to be able to do. So literally what we're probably distilling about $75,000 a year at the moment, which is more than enough for how we're growing the brand. And yeah, so we're going to add on, we're going to do an expansion at the end of 2024. That's going to add on 6 fermenters, and that will take my capacity to $250,000 a year, which is enormous for what I actually need, kind of thing. I hear, tell us about the team. I heard somebody wanted to see photos of stills. Do you want me to show you a photo of the stills? Cool. So if I share the screen and I go there, can nobody see that?
Loading. There we go.
Yeah, is that coming up for everybody?
Yep, yeah, we see it.
Perfect. So on the right, we've got the 3,800 litre to wash still. You can see the line arm is facing downwards. You've got the spirit still on the left-hand side. The line arm is pointing upwards. You can't really see it from that angle, but it goes up at quite an angle, of course, to increase that reflux. For stills that size, they are very tall stills. So again, it's to paraphrase one of the companies that I've worked for in my history, we are definitely the tallest stills in New Zealand.
But are they as tall as any giraffes? That's the real question.
Sorry?
Are they as tall as giraffes? That's the
We
real.
don't have giraffes, we have the odd kangaroo, so it's fine. So yeah, tell us more about the team. I see that question there. So I'll stay on the stills and I'll go on to the team. So as far as the stills, we are there. They are Macmillan stills from Preston Pans. So they're kind of one of the more traditional still makers. They're still doing their hand beaten copper stills. Everything was done in New Zealand apart from the stills, because nobody can make stills in New Zealand. I didn't want to go full size because everybody goes to full size. And so yeah, I really wanted to work with Scottish stills. We at Tullibardine, who I've run for many years, we have Macmillan stills there as well, and they worked very well for us over there. So we got them to make the stills for Pokeno at the same time. As far as the team is concerned, we're a small team. We've automated our distillery highly. Now people might frown at that, but I'm gonna assume this, because craft distilling is great, and we are true craft distillers in the fact that we make every cut by nose, by taste, and by hand. Okay, but craft doesn't mean different every time. Once we've locked on our process, we want to give you guys the same whiskey time and time again. And the only way to do that is through automation and control. So we've automated all of our brewing processes, incredibly highly automated with step-on systems, etc. So we can make sure that we've got our parameters, our profiles, we know what's happening, and we can adjust if we need to. We have complete control over the stills and the condensate, 0.1% of vapor, 0.1% of degree of condensate. We've got complete control. And that's, for me, again, like I said, I'm a bit OCD. If we're going to do something, we're going to do it properly. It also means that I can run the distillery with a small team. When you're investing in a distillery this size, and we are kind of, for our market and for our size, we are quite big. We're investing in this sort of infrastructure. I can't afford to have 25 distillers running my business. So we can actually, with one person, we can run a double mash, a double distillation, a CIP, and full barrels all at the same time, and one person can do that, and that's cool. So that allows me to function with a very small team. So today we're a team of 2 distillers. I have 2 full-time distillers. I have 1 cooper full-time. I have myself and my wife with the unpaid staff. And then we have a team of 4 people in the bottling hall. So we're a team of about 10 people today. I've got a sales guy who's fantastic, who looks after the New Zealand market for us as well. So yeah, there's 10 people in the business today. That will grow as we grow forward, but it's allowed us to keep those overheads down and focus on making whiskey and make sure that we're a sustainable business model as we're growing in the future. So cool.
How many casks are you laying down, and how many do you have so far?
At the moment, we've probably got about 3,000 casks laid down at the moment. We're laying down about 750 a year, which, for when you're just launching a single malt brand at the start, that's pretty considerable volume. So we're increasing every year. So we're increasing that production every year by probably about 100 casks, just to cope for the future development. And then we'll make a step change in a year and a half, 2 years time. Whether we decide to use that capacity or not is another thing. But again, what I didn't want to do, and I think that's something which we've been very focused on as far as our strategy is concerned, is that we've not launched into 100 markets. We've launched into 7 markets internationally. And what we're going to do is stay with those 7 markets and grow with those 7 markets. I don't want to be one of these brands who launches, then goes on allocation in 9 months' time or 12 months' time. So we're not going to launch everywhere. We're going to focus on launching a limited number of key markets. And when I feel that we can go a bit further, we'll open other markets. But again, because we've not got that, I don't want to have a constraint on myself to need to sell and compromise what we're trying to do. There's a very clear philosophy in what we're trying to do, and I'll make sure that we follow that on. Cool. Are you guys ready to pour the 3rd whiskey?
And you mentioned that
Absolutely.
it's New Zealand barley. Are you guys malting
Yes.
yourselves? Did you?
Yeah, so we don't malt it ourselves. We have maltsters who does that for us to our specification. So there's a maltsters which is just south of the North Island, and they do that for us. We are their biggest customer, and so they malt to our specifications. So again, we're using about 250 tons of barley a year, which is tiny in kind of Scottish old world standards, but for New Zealand is quite big.
And is there enough malt, or is there enough barley growing on the island?
Yeah.
That be for that to be sustainable?
In New Zealand, we're in the throes of a big craft brewing kind of movement. So there's lots of malt which is made for the craft brewing industry. So
And
there's
you
plenty.
spent grain, are you giving it to the, I guess, sheep farmers?
Yeah, no, not the sheep farmers. They don't like copper. But we give it to the beef farmers.
Beef,
So
okay.
there's actually a massive kind of dairy industry in New Zealand, because in New Zealand they provide a lot of the processed milk powder for China, and for Asia, for baby food, etc., and the rest of it. So actually the dairy industry is bigger than the kind of lamb industry. So yeah, so we give both the draft and the pot ale. We give that free of charge to the local farmers. They love us for it. The milk yields up, but hey, for us it's great. They take it away, so we like to function that way.
Nice.
Cool. So this last product that we're going to taste now, this is something a little bit different. I don't know if anybody's done this before because it's a bit stupid. So what we actually did is we did a full maturation of origin in first fill bourbon, and I kind of went, well, what would happen if I took the origin out of a first fill bourbon and put it into a fresh first fill bourbon? It's a bit silly because you get, waste 2 first fill bourbon casks on doing that kind of thing. But what it has done is it's just put origin on steroids. Yeah. So it's kind of accentuated that vanillin and the citrus and the rest of it. And it was a bit of experiment, and we kind of looked at this, and then Sam tasted and went, yes, it's quite cool actually. So we kind of decided to do this as the first single cask for the US. So I don't know if anybody's done a double first fill cask whiskey before. But it's funky. We bottled this at 56%, non-chill filtered this time. Obviously natural color, and it's that the nose is really, really cool. So what we did with the second, so it was left for a full year. Is full year of the second first fill bourbon.
Really good.
So again, what I find really interesting, and I'm not a massive fan myself of cask strength whiskies a lot of the time, but this doesn't drink for me like 56%. But I think that's just the delicateness and the way we massage our spirit through as well. That even at high percentage alcohol, it absorbs it. What do you guys think?
It's really interesting to have after the fruitiness of the first two, just because it has a lot more backbone, I think, the oak coming through. Yeah,
completely. That kind of the vanillin has really started to give it some presence and some depth, some even more depth. I mean, it's not, none of our whiskies are thin, but this is really kind of, it's really got that mouth coating depth, which I really enjoy.
But it still has that fruitiness too.
Yeah.
Really,
which is really cool because the oak has not overawed the fruitiness. The fruitiness is still keeping going through, and that's the cool thing that we want to try and do in all of our whiskeys is keep that fruitiness, because that's what we really, really like. I think it's what's going to characterize us and characterize the Pokeno brand is that fruitiness, the citrus notes, the grapefruit, the passion fruit, and that is something I really, really want to keep. And so as soon as I find that the oak starts overtaking my whiskies, I think it's going to be the time where I'm going to go, no, we need to stop the aging process.
How did you choose the town of Pokeno?
It was how did I choose the town of Pokeno? Honestly, it was we were in Auckland and we were looking for something within an hour of Auckland that we could build the distillery. We looked north, we looked south, and what kept bringing us back to Pokeno was the water. It was just the water. It was the volcanic hills. We would drive south of Auckland. You drive up the volcanic hills, you drive over the hills, and you've got the motorway goes down into the clouds. You've got the valley, which is just covered in clouds, and you see the top of the hills pointing out of it. And every time we drove over that hill, we went, wouldn't this be a cool place for a distillery? Driving down into the clouds, driving down into the stuff. And we just kept coming back to it. But we couldn't find land. We knew there was water, we couldn't find land. And then a kind of company decided to develop a plot of land into a kind of a artisanal industrial area, and also set up a water company. And we went, oh my God, this is perfect. And so yeah, that's what I went for Pokeno in the end. It was just at the right time in the right place. So yeah, very cool.
It's phenomenal. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
I'm curious. I know on your website, I see other offerings.
Yeah.
And I'm curious to taste those at some point.
Yeah. We've got so how many expressions have we got? So in the core range that we kind of put out on the global market is the Origin and the Discovery. We have the Revelation, which we do in limited versions in New Zealand. That's a product which has got a large percentage of first of all bourbon and New Zealand red wine casks. That's a product that we'll put out more widely when we can get more of the New Zealand red wine casks that we want. Because again, as part of that new no compromise thing, we had some fantastic red wine casks from my favorite winery, and we couldn't get them anymore. And so then I went, no, we're going to stop it then, because I can't get the red wine casks that I want to do what I'm doing. So that will be brought out more fully afterwards. There's a couple of kind of cool things coming out later this year. I don't know if I can talk about those, Sam, or not. Can I? I can. I see a nod. We're bringing out what we're going to call, I don't know what we're going to call it yet. It might be our inspiration series. I was going to call it our experimental series, but somebody else has done that. And that's kind of products that show our creativity, that we're 90% of the time we're serious, because we have to be if we want to develop a global brand. But then 10% of the time I go to my guys, right, we're having fun. It's the last month of the year. What are we going to do this year? What crazy shit can we actually decide we're going to do? The first year in 2019, nobody could come up with anything. So I said, cool, let's triple distill. And everybody goes, we can't triple distill. We've only got 2 stills. I said, yes, we can. So it involved forklifts, ISO tanks, and probably things which aren't very safe. But we triple distilled. So we've got a batch of triple distillation coming out as an allocated volume to the US in July, August this year. And that is just citrus and honey, honey. It's crazy. And then we also did that year, we did what I call kind of winter malt, festive malt, Christmas malt, call it what you like. I'd been very fed up for people when they do Christmas malts, basically putting it in a sherry cask and throwing it in a red label kind of thing and saying it was a Christmas malt. And I said, well, how can we make a proper kind of Christmas festive malt? So I said, well, what do we eat at Christmas? Chocolate, cool, chocolate malt. What else do we eat? Caramel, cool, caramel malt. What else do we do? What's good in New Zealand? Manuka smoked honey, cool, Manuka smoked malt, cool. And we basically threw all that into the mash tun. The wort was black. I went, oh my God, what have I done? And it's like, I'm never going to get this clean kind of thing. But then we threw it into first of all bourbon, and it's now almost, it's 3.5 years old. Absolutely fantastic. It's not peat, but it's Manuka smoke, it's chocolate, it's crazy. So that's coming over to the US as well this year. That's part of this kind of creative range kind of thing. So yeah, that's the bits of fun we do. We're also, I think the next proper edition we'll bring out probably 2024. We've been doing a lot of work on virgin casks. So there's going to be some virgin casks. And again, we're playing around to not over all the spirit. But the thing I'm most excited about is the native wood. So the first ever New Zealand native wood product will come out probably in about 4 months' time. So that's product we've had in cask we're finishing the first lot and that's me because I'm impatient. So the first native wood casks I threw mature spirit into just because I wanted to get a product out kind of 6 months later. But yeah, the native wood, the first one we're doing is Tortora, and Tortora is a New Zealand native hardwood. It does leak a bit. It's a bit porous, the wood, so I'm losing about a liter a week, so it's not going to stay much more than 6 months. But the taste is absolutely fantastic. But again, it's the kind of thing, it's all experimental. This is, which is fun. Yeah, it sounds a bit like Mizunara. That leaks as well. Yeah. So is there any more information you guys would like to know? What do you guys think of this one?
So
Dangerously easy to drink.
Vadim is going to ask us to fill out a poll and to ask what here it is. And I'm going to say, oh, I don't want to choose. I love them all.
I know which one I prefer. I'll say afterwards.
You can vote.
I can vote. I'm going to vote.
There you go.
I've just
See
voted.
if you can skew the results.
See if I skew the results.
Yeah, these were exceptional. They were all really good. And I've been a huge fan of New World and just kind of world whiskeys as of late, and understanding the concept that it doesn't have to be a 12-year-old depending on the climate. I've had some really fantastic American single malts at 4 years old that have just blown me away. And so, it sounds like your climate's pretty, how is your climate in New Zealand? What would you equate it to?
I mean, it's Goa. I mean, it is kind of like Indian. I think we are. I mean, it gets so humid in my warehouses that I have water running down the walls of the warehouse inside. Sometimes it is that kind of high level of humidity. We have to choose the times of the year and the times of the day we're going to bottle and label, because sometimes there is no way we're sticking that label to that bottle because there's just so much condensation on the bottle. So yeah, it is, people don't associate New Zealand with that, but if you go out into the kind of woods near us up the hills, it's palm trees. It is a subtropical island. People don't think that, but it's people think that New Zealand's this tiny speck on the side of the map. But for me to drive from the top of the North Island to the bottom of the North Island, so just the one island, is an 18-hour drive. It takes me 2.5 hours to fly from the North Island to the South Island. It's not as small as everybody thinks.
Wow. I'm trying to figure out what that's like equal to.
I think you
It's
just
been
blew
like-
our minds with that fact, by the way.
Yeah, if you drive from the bottom of California to the top of California, it's what, 20 hours?
No, it's like, maybe. Yeah.
Maybe 24 hours, something like that.
Well, I can fly from
Depends on
LA
how fast you drive.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I can fly from LA to Seattle in an hour and 20, is that something like that? So for me to fly to Auckland in the North Island to Queenstown in the South Island is double that.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a very, very long country, very, very long country.
And your
But
warehousing
sorry, go ahead.
I was gonna say since it's a long country, I'm guessing the climate changes quite a bit depending on where you are.
Yeah, if you're sitting in the South Island, you're with a distillery, you're evaporating 2 to 3% a year, very much like Scotland. And if you're sitting in the North Island, but if you even the ocean temperature, so the ocean temperature, I mean, when I'm not distilling, which is 95% of the time, I love going for a surf. If I go surfing in the North Island, the water temperature can be sitting at 20 degrees. I get up to the South Island, it's sitting at 13, 12 centigrade. It's not Fahrenheit, that's centigrade. So there's a massive flow, and that affects the climate enormously.
Wow. And quick question, since you started all this from scratch yourself, and you can choose not to answer it. Just out of curiosity, what's the capital investment to start a distillery? I mean, it's got to be millions.
Oh, it's millions. Oh, it's through like us. Yeah, I mean, we're scaled up to, like I say, develop a global brand. In US dollars, it would be. Give me 2 seconds. Get the old calculator out. Yeah, it's about 7 million. But again, it's doing it properly.
Yeah.
Vadim's thinking about it, so he's trying to figure out how much capital he has to get.
I'm looking around this room to see who's going to chip in.
But Vadim, I'm sorry to say, I think you're already just like, what chance do you have against Pokeno, right? I mean, it's the perfect climate, and he's getting them out in 3 years, and he's getting, you go to Scotland, it takes 20 years to get this type of a product out, right? This is amazing. This is great.
But I think what I think is that people ask me a lot of the times, what's the whiskey you prefer? And I go, I've not got one, because there's so many passionate people out there making great single malt whiskey, and anybody who puts the time, the effort, the heart into making a single malt whiskey, for me, deserves the respect and whatever. And I made, personal choices. I do like, I don't like, exception the rest of it. But I just go, yeah, anybody who's going to dive in the deep end and make whiskey and do the investment is, yeah, lots of respect.
Well, I think the votes are in for a favorite of these expressions. You want to guess which one is the group's favorite?
Origin.
It's a good guess. I love a trick question. It's pretty much tied.
Oh, it was close. It was close.
Origin and Discovery tied for first place, and Double Bourbon is right up there, 3 to 4 votes.
Yeah, but I voted for Origin, so thankfully I did, because otherwise I'd have been wrong.
That Origin, I went back to it after the Double Bourbon, and that Origin just still stands up. At 43, it still drinks beautiful. It's not lacking in any way. Well done.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you for everybody for taking the time to taste the whiskey tonight. It's been a pleasure talking to you guys.
Thank you, Matt. And thank you to Sam for getting us all together and bringing in fine whiskey like this. Sam, thank you.
Vadim, I enjoy your group, so it's always a pleasure. And they showed again tonight, after tasting something at 46.4 and cask strength, getting back to 43% and enjoying it. You got to have a discerning palate there. So thank you all.
So Sam, just make sure you bring everything from New Zealand, you bring it into Los Angeles first. Okay.
Hey, actually, we have one warehouse in Los Angeles, and Matt was there, a week ago, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
Making sure we don't drink it ourselves, but we actually share with good people. So he's back home safe and sound. So yeah, we do have a few warehouses in Northern California and one in Commerce. So naturally, California gets first shot when we bring anything like this. Yeah. Matt,
John, we'll take care of you.
If I missed it or not, when you were talking about discovery, and you were saying that you mature in 3 types of casks, fully mature.
Yeah.
Ex-bourbon. And then what do you do then after you bring them together, after you marry them together?
So we fill them back into the same casks. And the reason I do that is that once I've made the whiskey with the profile I'm looking for, I don't want to influence or change that profile at all. So what I do is I fill it back into the same cask that I emptied. So let's imagine that I empty 10 First World Bourbon casks, 3 Oloroso and 3 PX. I then fill that whiskey back into the 10 First World Bourbon, the 3 Oloroso and the 3 PX. And then after the 3 months, I then marry them together again in the vat, and then I'll bottle it out. And that way I'm not influencing anything apart from the casks it was originally in. So if I put it back into First World Bourbon, I'm going to reduce the kind of influence that I've got from the sherry. It's I just prefer to fill them back into those same casks and just let the product marry. The aim of putting it back into casks is not to change the flavor. It's just to allow it that time to kind of settle and harmonize and marry together.
Does that also mean you can't reuse those casks afterwards? Because they're kind of...
Yeah, I don't use any of my casks afterwards. I use them once and they go.
What do you do with them?
I sell them onto breweries. I cut them in half and sell them to people as planters. But again, it's part of that non-compromise. It's like, for me, I'm taking so much out of the cask after one maturation that I wouldn't get it from the second time. And I don't even want to rechar them, etc. and the rest, because that's not what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for a heavy oak influence on my product. So we just move them on.
Well, if someone who owns a cooperage can do that.
We can, but that's it. We tighten them, sell them to the brewers. They're delighted to have them.
Nice. Any other questions? I think we're good. Well, thank you so much, Matt. We really appreciate you spending the evening with us. Fantastic product. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. Look forward to enjoying a dram together sometimes.
For sure. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers. Well, as always, thank you everyone for being here tonight. And I'm gonna hit stop on the recording and we can just hang out. But William's back and he's in witness protection now.
Just about hanging on.
Nice. Do you have another nap, I hope?
Not quite yet, but I may have a wee lie down now.
Sounds good. Well, thank you so much for spending the evening with us.
Thanks,
man,
guys.
Or the morning with us, the night, what have you.
Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for coming
Appreciate
along.
you. For sure.